Hello, and welcome to Further Comments. We're really thrilled to have you here. Horace, really good to see you again.
Likewise, Damien. Hey, I think I've got another name for an episode before we start, and this one's going to be called Two Birds with One Stone.
I like it.
Well, our guest this week is Helder Santos from Bird and Bird. And the reason we've invited him is, and you might have seen in the news, Bird and Bird has just gone through a 6-month pilot with Leia/now Legora, and decided to pick them as the Gen AI platform to roll out across the entire firm. They're not the first law firm in the world to pick a Gen AI platform to roll out. Ashurst has done it, A&O has done it, etc. Like it's not the first one to do this. But what's interesting to me in particular was I think Bird and Bird, you guys are the first one to announce a firm-wide rollout for Leia/Legora. And my question is, what made you decide Legora over Harvey or co-counsel or other things? And what are all the factors that went into this? What's pilot process like? And all those kind of like really interesting decision-making factors. So Helder, welcome to the podcast, first of all, and
Thank
really
you.
looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. To your point, yes, we look at other tools. We did our horizon scanning. We match capabilities, everything that you need to check when you do this type of processes, and they are very standard. I must say, with the case of Legora, previously Leia, was the energy, was also something that popped up to us is they were very clear on their roadmap, the direction they wanted to go. When we started, and of course the trial was 6 months, almost 7 months, we saw lots of things happening, but in the beginning, they just show us this is where we want to be in 6 months, this is where we want to be in 1 year. And I can tell you that in 6 months, they achieved something that showed us almost 1 year ahead. They were quite fast, but in the beginning, we didn't know that. I must say that was also a leap that we decided to take. We honestly believed in their approach, on their technical skills. We really enjoy their energy, and for us, it's also about the partnerships. With Legora was much easier to sit and talk. We want to build, or we want to help you to shape the product, and you can do that to a certain level. But since day one, I think the relation was very transparent, and we always said, not everything will work, not everything will be perfect, but we want to make a bet on that.
Something everyone is thinking about is build versus buy. And there's build, there's buy, and then as Oz has also said, there's rent. So build, buy, and rent. How did you work through that process?
I arrived Bird and Bird 18 months ago. When I arrived, our IT team basically were already having the OpenAI playground, the ChatGPTs, the experience. One thing that I noticed when I arrived to this organization is our lawyers, at least from my experience compared with other law firms where I work, our lawyers are very, very techy. There are an enormous amount of lawyers that are developers or have double degrees in economics, chemistry, and they are very hands-on. That means when I arrived 18 months, people were already doing their thing. Renting or buying a platform, as you were referring, was also one of our decisions, that we believe that we cannot build everything. We don't have the resources, and it's costly. It's not only financial. And we decided the generic legal AI assistant that we need, we go to a product into the market. Where we need to build or tackle niche problems for our clients, or partnership, because it's also something that we do, or we build by our own. And I think there's no answer to the build or buy question, and everyone does that question. Don't get me wrong, Damien. I think it's case by case. In ours was a very clear decision. What is generic and general, what we can give to everyone, we will not build. We will partnership and use it.
When I worked for the court system, they would build often themselves. And the joke within the court system was that court system, yesterday's technology, tomorrow. It's kind of, if you build, often you build yesterday's technology and it'll come sometime, right? Whereas if you rent, of course, you have today's technology or perhaps tomorrow's technology today.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw it last week. We did with Legora and from Council an event in our UK office where basically we brought Legora, young startup in Sweden, with from Council, a very well-renowned, established legal content provider in the UK, where law firm, traditional vendor, new startup, all working together and showing to the market that this works. It showed that there is a generation gap, of course, but we just overlap and we work all together. I think it's, to your point, is it's just collaboration in the end of the day.
So I really liked the cooperation between, how you kind of framed it as startup plus law firm plus maybe established content player. And that made me think about, there's also another way to look at this is that you have your private data, that is your contracts, your settlement agreements, that kind of thing, coupled with the public data, the law, the cases, the statutes, and the regulations. And then a third vector is what's stored in your lawyer's brains. That is, how do we do this kind of matter in this jurisdiction for this kind of document? So between private data, public data, cases, statutes, and regulations, and what's stored in your lawyer's brains, how do you think of the compilation of that private, public, and lawyer's brains together, maybe in one platform, maybe in separate platforms?
We were able to have lawyers trying how they work with public data, with internal data. I can tell you that in the beginning, when we released what we call legal sources at public available data, case law, didn't work so well with the Gen AI because it's not a traditional search, but it's also not a Gen AI. And right now we are much better, and people also learn that these tools are not search boxes, first of all. And now we start to leverage our own internal data for several reasons. Our usage of internal data was restricted because, let's be honest, we were in a trial. Now it's much more open. The integration is there. People can query with these tools, the DMS, with all the guardrails that we have and we need to have to our clients. And I can tell you there are lots of things that don't even touch this type of systems because it's how it should be. But we are seeing people joining the internal and the external, and that brings to your third point, that is critical thinking that people start to build on using not only the tools but the knowledge accessible to them. Some of them are using as a memory activation almost. Oh, I know that I have this precedent, let me do that. Others are using as, oh, let's extend what I already know with things that somewhere is stored in a database. And I think the overlap is, you have the public, you have the internal, and you have the people. And the critical thinking is one of the most important, because you can bring tools and documents, and then if you don't know how to act on that, it's not so relevant.
I think it sounds like training was a big part of the pilot and adoption process as well. And you've already mentioned, Helder, like part of the reason why you chose this vendor was because of the partnership and the transparency and the good feelings that you have when you're working with them, which I think is like an awesome criteria, but also really kind of vague and nebulous. I wonder, for the listeners, are you happy to share like some concrete criteria? What were the things that you were looking for when you went into this process of going, who's the right partner? Especially because you're saying, hey, part of this is buying futures that don't exist yet. Like you're partnering with someone in good faith that they'll be able to deliver. So how did you decide like who's the right partner?
I presented a slide in one meeting, and I think was like 20 logos there. Only 2 logos were not a startup. That means in a space that I go to, I think was somehow at management, and say, this is all the vendors that we are talking. Honestly, they only recognize 2 because they are big companies and so on. On the other hand, there is a criteria. There are also always the capabilities, the security, all that pre-check was done to all of them. And of course, on top of the tests on how reliable they are, how accurate they are. And we are talking almost 1 year ago, where some of these questions were very gray. We also look at integration capabilities because we have a tech stack very, very well established. And of course, at some stage, we look at the numbers. We need to look at the numbers because it's a business. When we merge all of this in the three companies that we take last, with our current platform was the one that got very good points. And adding to that, they're open to show us what was under the hood, how they were thinking, even telling us, do you want to see the system prompts? Here it is. We don't have any secrets to you. Can you help us if we are doing something wrong? And I think that creates a scenario where we thought this is the right approach. We can fail, and we can fail every day, but gave us that assurance of at least their transparency. I'm not saying that others couldn't do that. We had our engineering IT team having calls with their engineering, our lawyers having calls with their engineering. Every 2 weeks, there was people sitting with their product owner and saying, "Oh, maybe this shouldn't be red. I prefer this green. By the way, can this take me a coffee machine or what?" It's all these type of things. You don't know this in the beginning. Now it's very easy for me to say was amazing, but what stood up at that moment and what we were looking for is how open these vendors are. And I think they did a very good job in the beginning.
That's great. And of course, lawyers are fragile entities. We often approach technology with a bit of trepidation, maybe some optimism, maybe a mix of those two things. As we think about critical thinking, which you talked about earlier, there is, of course, lawyers' critical thinking, which is our stock and trade. But then there's also the reasoning models. That is O1 and O3, now DeepSeek, and Claude now 3.7 has their reasoning models. So how do you think about all those playing together?
I think there is a mix of everything, right? You can ask 10 lawyers and you'll get 11 answers, right? In our case, having the new models already available in our platforms, having, like I said in the beginning, lots of techie lawyers that already know and use this, having a very strong internal, I will not call it training, but a program of helping people to understand the technologies and how to use it. I can tell you that our initial workshops were about what are LLMs from the foundation model, and then explain to lawyers, knowledge people how this works. And I think that creates a scenario of people were afraid or why this is so technical for me, but work out quite well. But to your point is we are already seeing people or some of our more advanced lawyers using the new models and doing benchmarking between the tools. And even last week, I got emails from, oh, I test this one, I test DeepSeek, I test the new model. Can we have this in our internal thing? And we start to roll out. Legora now has the deep thinking mode activated since last week.
It's interesting, but I'm going to kind of bring us back to something which was the features that Legora presented. I want to ask, like, if there were features that you expected to be really successful, but then it was like, oh, nobody wanted this. And likewise, features that you didn't expect to be such a huge hit, but then really took off. Were there any surprises that you found?
Well, there was some surprises on some of the features. Mainly, we expected a bit more usage on what is the assistant, traditional GPT. We see an intake in other features that allow to do multiple prompts against multiple documents at the same time. We saw a big intake on that. Personally, I was expecting a bit more people saving their prompts as a prompt library. I think that for me personally are two surprises. The major surprise was the adoption rate, not on specific features, but on the entire tool. After 2 months, we had almost everyone saying, can I have this? Can I have that? Can we improve this part? Of course, there are things that don't go well. I believe as others, we create our Gen AI use cases. We ask people to navigate their use cases. We have good use cases, not so good use cases, awful use cases. But then we also spend energy in understanding that awful use cases. Some of them are because people wanted to that the platform is a silver bullet and cannot be. The second is they are trying to do things that are not aimed to do with this type of tools. And the others is, oh, you are using the tool slightly in a way that you shouldn't. Let's work with you and bring the next. We have a very nice case where we sit with someone that told us, oh, this doesn't work. And we said, look, you need to think about context. And this was, again, 8 months of work, but also surprised how people were fast to move the mindset from a search box to personas, context, giving all that type of things.
That's great. So as you've been running pilots for all of the things that you've been doing, there is defining success. That is, what does success mean? So some say these are metrics that we're using. How many users are we having per day? And then there are qualitative assets. Is this really helping me in my work? Is it helping me a lot? Is it helping me a little? It's hard to be able to provide metrics on those things. So we'll call that the x-axis. And then the y-axis is how quickly it's being adopted. So as we think about metrics and qualitative side on the one side, and then maybe are lawyers accepting things faster, better, stronger than they would have 6 years ago, post-pandemic? Or is it maybe because AI is such an amazing, life-changing aspect? What do you think about the adoption?
One of the things that our users most praise in the tool that we are using is the UX. They say that it's very easy, it's very intuitive. And I think that all this, it's a bit of everything. There's how much time we save, how faster it is, how people are happy, how people are not happy. It's very difficult to quantify. It's almost impossible to say this task save us this amount of time, because you, Damien, can be very happy because you save 30 minutes. Horace can be very happy because save 3 hours in the same task. And I can be very happy because I'm not saving time, but I'm much more comfortable what I'm doing. There is no black and white.
What you've just said is really interesting. I've heard from a lot of, we'll say, more senior lawyers that I've heard voices coming out of their mouths. I hope I retire before this all comes to pass. And a little bit of me within my brain thinks, gosh, I hope so too, because you'll get out of the way so that we can actually make progress in this.
It's a great answer. I guess the direction I'll take that in is, if you had your magic lab and 3 wishes that you can make with Gen AI, or not even Gen AI, just technology in general, like what are those 3 wishes you would make?
I think the first thing is really what people say, the front door, or it's really a reality. And collaboration it's from everything, but it's not that we replace people, or it's that is really digital. I will say the second part is really push to the limits of the technology, what the technology can do, because there's a conservative approach saying this is not for us, this is for the health industry, or this is for the retail industry. Or I think we need to push a bit the boundaries, and like Damien said before, with the reasoning models, maybe we are getting there. And the third, and this is very personal, is let's just be open and transparent. Let's just share the good things, but also the bad things.
As we think about law firms, of course, law firms are in existence to make money. We are businesses after all. And so making money, that could involve the billable hour, which we've had as the dominant force. And then you have other methods of fees. So, of course, with the billable hour, the cynic would say that with the billable hour, the slowest lawyer wins the race. That is, if you spend 10 hours on a thing that I spend 1 hour on, you make more money than I do. The cynic would say that, but the optimist would say that with large language models, you're able to do more in those 8 hours, therefore giving you a competitive advantage. So maybe instead of asking one legal research question in those 8 hours, maybe I could ask 20 or 50 and then give a much better answer to my client than I would have in the old world. So think about the billable hour and maybe how AI shifts the billable hour. And then also think about other fees. That is flat fees, subscription fees, value-based pricing, whether it's contingency or joining on the upside. Do you see AI both helping on the billable hour side, that is giving more for the same amount of time? And what do you think about the billable hour, maybe pushing more things to the flat fee, subscription fee, and value-based? What do you think about AI's effect on both?
There's so many models and there's so many ways of pricing that there's no one size fits all. My own perspective. There are ways of deriving the client service using the traditional methods and more advanced methods. It's not about how we charge, it's the value this approach brings. Instead of let's bring the technology for the sake of it, it's committing to the balance of bringing the technology, the potential cost, the efficiency, how we bring that to the clients, and what the clients really want. Because there are clients that don't want so much the use of technology. There are clients that want technology for everything. Our organization is present in so many different jurisdictions. The markets are different.
To the point of clients, whether they want it or don't want it, many law firms said that in the past, that is, say, 2023, a lot of clients said, do not put my data in large language models. Do not do it. That was 2023. But now the law firms have said it's totally flipped. The clients are saying, hey, law firms, how are you using AI to be able to make things better, faster, stronger? And there's almost no one in the 2023 era, don't use my tech. How is Bird and Bird seeing client demand or lack thereof?
I think it's very similar. That is something that our risk and compliance team is much more aware, but we have both sides of the coin. Some clients will say where you are using the tech, which tech are you using? They want to have a complete transparency. Again, it comes back to the context of that client, right? In the last 2 years, we see people much more open, but I think it's not only because the world move on, it's also because we and the market as law firms, we explain where we are using, what are the guardrails, and we are continuing to ensuring our clients that what we did in the last 30, 40 years on technology and all that standards are the same.
So I have a question, and this is a question that's going to help both the buyers and the sellers of this technology, which is, in this really, really noisy market, Helder, what did you pay attention to? And what should people be paying attention to?
Almost sounding repetitive, it's the transparency and the roadmap. I'm not saying that all are like that, but I see lots of vendors that are just LLMs wrappers. Just here is the LLM, this will do something. We try to be direct with the vendors, saying what you want to solve. Okay, you want to solve A, how you are solving, and how this operates to solve that problem. And then if everything is aligned, yes, we move to the next step is do we have that problem to solve? Because sometimes we don't have that problem to solve, or because it's not our area of business, or it's not where we want to put our efforts, lots of things.
I used to be throwing out the term GPT wrapper quite blatantly. I'm now a bit ashamed of doing that because I've been speaking to a lot of people in the Valley, and they reminded me that what is a SaaS product, a software as a service product, but a wrapper around HTML and SQL databases. Really, the question is, what does that wrapper do? So I'm using the term wrapper a bit less these days because if it really does solve a problem that is a real valuable problem that needs to be solved, then maybe the fact that it is merely a wrapper, maybe that matters less to the marketplace. The other aspect of it, number two, is that as the large language models get more capable, how much product is there to build the top of? What can any provider do that is on top of that wrapper, if you will? I think that's going to be a real question for our times. Yeah. So with that, our closing question. I'm trying to make this a standard closing question, and I'm going to ask you, what makes you optimistic? That is, what makes you optimistic about your firm in the age of AI? What makes you optimistic about a profession? What makes you optimistic about humanity these days?
What makes me optimistic is really that I landed in a place that we can openly discuss and move things forward. Not always right, not always wrong. This amount of support that we have to be transparent and to showcase. Like I said before, we had an event last week and I was really surprised that everyone is saying, this is not normal law firms do, open the doors and bring partnerships and so on. I think we are in a position that law firms are being more open to a different business. They are just widening their approach to things, and I think that brings me some optimistic view.
So I think I'm going to give my little optimism this week, which is I think more and more people are maturing in the way they're using these tools. There's a clear separation between tools versus the kind of underlying LLM. So kind of going to your point, Damien, wrapper versus underlying technology, and people are building tools on top that the technology that the language model can use that language models without the tools could not achieve. So kind of like Code Interpreter, for example, that OpenAI released a long time ago. And the second is, I think the different LLMs that productize in legal, so the Layers, the Harveys, the co-counsels, the Vincent for VLEX, they're all starting to have personalities that people are recognizing. So like Harvey, for example, and I say this with no disparagement, is you're too busy to build anything yourself, so just pay them a lot of money to build stuff for you. The Layers are really good UX and you can build some stuff yourself. The co-counsels are, we're going to plug into lots of data, just lots and lots of data. And they're all kind of like coming up with their little edges, and people are starting to recognize that, which is, I think, nice because I think for 2 years, everyone's like, how are you different? What? I don't get it. So I think that makes me optimistic that everyone's carving out their little spot in the market.
I think you're spot on that characterization of the marketplace. And yeah, I think that everyone needs to figure out what their differentiation is. Certainly ours is data. We have lots of it, not just for the US, but in many countries. I would say making me optimistic. Last week, I was at 2 conferences. One was the Inside Practice Conference in Chicago. And then the second was in DC, the Court-Appointed Neutrals. That is, if a judge has multi-district litigation with 10,000 cases consolidated in this multi-district litigation, they often provide what used to be called a special master, but is now called a court-appointed neutral. So as part of that, I'm now optimistic. Bridget McCormick was, I gave the keynote on one day, and then Bridget gave the luncheon keynote. And I'm optimistic what AAA is doing, being able to say that we are working to be able to democratize dispute resolution in the ways that courts in the past might take a long time to get through those 10,000 cases. AAA is really thinking through how to be able to bring down the cost of litigation and therefore make accessible access to justice for cases that maybe are below a $75,000 threshold, which no lawyer is going to really have any case that is below $75,000. She's really working to be able to say $75,000 for many people in the United States, most people in the United States, is the difference between having a home over their heads or not. So we shouldn't say that $75,000 doesn't matter. So my optimism these days comes from being able to say, maybe we can give more access to justice using AI, and maybe AAA and others thinking like them is going to be able to bring that cost down. So with that, Horace, you want to bring us out?
Well, I'm going to bring us out by saying I've come up with a better name for this episode, and it's going to be 2 birds with 1 phone. And I want to also thank Helder for joining us and sharing his insights, because I think there's a lot of wonderful takeaways, and for me, it's transparency.
Thank you.
So let's all continue. Helder.
No, thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure to share and also try in a small remit to show what we are doing.
It's been great fun.
Looking forward to the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.